Welcome everyone, and good afternoon. I hope everyone's doing well. It is afternoon out here too. I'm in California. I'm just outside of Los Angeles, so we're all in the afternoon now. But I appreciate everyone being here this afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that I do have a PowerPoint that will be part of the presentation here. So here we go. All right. So this is the title of the webinar today, Pursuing the Common Good in Our Communities and engaging, more specifically about engaging local government. And just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a political social worker. That's how I identify myself. I'm also Jesuit educated. I went to Loyola Academy High School in Wilmette, Illinois. I grew up in Chicago and ended up going to Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I was very active in campus ministry and doing retreats and singing, singing at masses, and had a wonderful time there in Milwaukee. Moved out here to California um, in 1987 and was have still remain active in my local parish. But a few years ago, right before the pandemic, I decided that I was being called to take part in the spiritual exercises in everyday life, which I did at the Loyola Institute of Spirituality, which is located here in just south of where I am in Orange County, California. Um, the different affiliations you see on the screen right now are different things that I've been actively that I like that I'm actively involved in and consider a part of my kind of my everyday work and service. And you see on the bottom left, the National Association of Social Workers. That's the professional association that I belong to because I'm a social worker. And we have over, just I think it's about 110, 120,000 members of the association throughout the United States. I just recently finished my term as the president of the board of directors of the California chapter of NASW, which has about 8,000 members. We're the largest chapter in the country. And I'm still involved in NASW and on the various numbers of committees, both on the national level as well as in the California chapter. I teach at California State University, Los Angeles. I teach social work there, and I've been doing that for over 20 years. And bottom right is the seal of the County of Los Angeles because I've been appointed. I've spent the last year as the second vice chair for the Los Angeles County Commission on Mental Health. And probably the biggest experience, or at least the most significant experience I've had in local government is in Artesia, California, which is the city that I live in. And you'll see the our coat of arms there, our logo. Um, I served as an elected council member and mayor for the city of Artesia for almost 12 years. So for total, I've been kind of involved in local government probably for over 25 years in both on the city level, regionally, as well as in Los Angeles County. And I'm still involved. As I mentioned, I'm on the Mental Health Commission, but I also serve as the chair of the Planning Commission here in my city. So I have quite a bit of experience that I want to share with you within the next, I don't know, 35 minutes or so. So I'm going to give it a shot here. Um, so what did I learn over 25 years in local government? So I'm going to try to distill that 25 years for you and in the next few minutes. So this is this is a really cool illustration figure that I found from a place called the Institute for Local Government, and they're based here in Sacramento, California, which really gives kind of, I think, a good overview of what local government is about, right? So local government is everything from a municipal government, like a city or a town or a village. Um, and I know they use a variety of maybe other terms in in other parts of the country. But that local in your city or town or village where you live, if there's an elected government, that's your local government. Schools, school districts, school boards are also considered local government because those districts cover schools in your local area. And counties are also seen as local government because they are uh, in many places, especially in places that where there are unincorporated areas of a county. That is, they're not part of a municipality, a city, or a village or a town. Then they are subject to um, the county uh, government. So those are kind of this kind of can this figure can work for all forms of local government. So you see there are kind of four essential parts. There's the public, that's all of us that live in a particular jurisdiction, whether it's a city. I'll be talking mostly about cities here or municipalities. Um, but it's the public, everyone that lives there, right? Whether they're registered to vote or not registered to vote, it's all the people that live in that city. And then you have the electeds, right? Those are the people that are on the councils or the boards that govern that particular local government. And then you have a chief executive, which is the person who is not elected, but a person who is generally hired and fired by the elected officials to actually run the city government every day, the day to day. It's akin to a an executive director of a nonprofit agency who runs the day-to-day business of that nonprofit, but the policy and fiscal responsibility lie with the board of directors of that nonprofit. So it's kind of a similar structure. So you have the chief executive who runs the um, day-to-day matters of that city government, and then you have all the staff that carry out all the business of the government. And you see by that arrow that goes from the staff to the public, so the staff provides the services directly to the public. So it's a big circle. They're all interrelated, as you see by the arrows in the middle, because everyone interacts with everybody else. So public not only interacts with elected officials, but the public can interact with the chief executive of that city. Certainly, the public has a lot of interaction with staff. If you have children in a parks and recreation program, more than likely you're interacting with city staff who run that programming, or at a senior center that's run by the city. You or your family may be interacting with staff. So that's kind of how local government works. But in my experience over 25 years, what I've really found, and I know that many of you know this, is that the one of the big responsibilities here when you look at this chart is the public, because the public elects the elected official. And that's the piece I think that I found in my experience is missing. Not that people don't vote, it's that not everybody votes. Not everybody that is eligible to vote votes. People that are eligible to vote don't register to vote, and there are people that are actually registered to vote that don't vote. So there are a lot of people out there that for whatever reason don't vote, and you get a really small percentage of those who are actually eligible to vote that vote in an election. And why is that a problem? Because if you're not, if people are not represented in their view in voting for an elected official, then those elected officials are going to only represent the views of the people that voted them in. And this is from my own experience, because when I ran for election, as I told you, I served on city government for almost 12 years. When I was running for election, the multiple times I ran for election, right? Um, my resources are limited in running elections. So I and many people who campaign do this because we're all limited in our resources. We only reach out to people that are consistently voting in a local election. And that data is readily available to anyone who is running for an election. So if I go through the list of, say, I have 2,000 people that are registered to vote in my city, but only 800 have voted in the last 2 or 3 city council elections. That data is all available through your local registrar, right? If only 800 of those 2,000 are actually voting, and I have limited resources, who am I going to reach out to? All 2,000 people or 800 people? I'm only going to reach out to the 800 people because I have limited resources. Flyers are expensive, signs are expensive. Any type of way to reach out to people is expensive. So I'm going to spend more time on people that vote than on the people that don't vote. So in reality, if you're not voting, you're voting for the status quo. Your non-vote says, I agree with the status quo. I think I love the way everything's going in my city, and I want it to go keep it the same way. Okay. So that's why it's important that we vote, and we vote for the people that are going to represent us, because they're only listening to the people that vote right now. And if you don't vote, you're out. You're out of this configuration here, because you may not have elected that elected official, and now you have somebody that may or may not represent your views. So what does Pope Francis say about all this? Well, this is he didn't say get out the vote. That's just my title. What he said was, what Pope Francis wrote is, I beg the Lord to grant us more politicians who are genuinely disturbed by the state of society, the people, the lives of the poor. So I don't know about in your cities, towns, municipalities, or where you live, but I can get in my car and I can look around, drive around my city, or ride my bike around the city, or walk through my city, and I can tell you that there are a number of things that I'm disturbed about in my city. And there are things that resonate, things that I'm disturbed about, because they are affecting the quality of life of the people that live in my city, whether it's my neighbors or the business owners who want people to come into my city to shop. Or if my city is small here. I'm right outside of Los Angeles, city of Los Angeles, about 15 miles. So we're a very small city here, but we have our issues. We have a handful of people that are unhoused in my city, and I can see them. Um, and I know that they exist. But throughout Los Angeles, as probably you all have heard, and it's like this in many urban areas, there is a problem with a lot of people that are unhoused. Where are the people, like Pope Francis says, where are the people that are generally disturbed by the fact that people are unhoused in our communities, or lack access to mental health services, or don't have food, or are hungry? Where are the elected officials who are truly disturbed by that and feel a calling to do something about it? That's why it's important for us not just to vote for the people. What I think Pope Francis is saying here, this says to me, is that we need to vote the right people in there who are really going to address these basic issues in our community, of people that are hungry, people that are not clothed, people that are being shunned by society, people who are being on the left on the side of the road, injured and traumatized and tattered, like in the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? Where are the people that are really outraged and disturbed by that? And why aren't they being elected? Because elected officials, to tell you the truth, because I've been there, elected officials can do something about these issues. But we don't have, in many cases, the people who are truly disturbed by what we see in our communities, who want to step up to take roles of leadership in our communities to try to do something about it. Now, what can governments do about it? Well, Pope Francis says that politics seeks the common good. Now, I have to tell you, I was blown away when I read this, when I was reading through one of Pope Francis's writings, his encyclicals, that talk about where he says politics is is a way to seek common good. It really blew me away, but it really resonated with my own experience. He says each human community possesses a common good, which permits it to be recognized as such. It is in the political community that its most complete realization is found. In the political community, right? And what that says to me is it's not just the people who are elected, right? If you go back to the slide I showed you earlier, right? This is the political community. That includes all of you because we can be engaged. In a democracy, we are expected to be engaged with our local government in this political community. So it's this political community, the government that is organized to, as you remember from that arrow that I showed you, from the staff to the public, that's here. The government is supposed to provide services to the public. So this is the political community that can address these issues, the common good. Right? What is the common good in our community? What is it in our communities and neighborhoods? I'll tell you again from my experience. Public safety is a common good. Everyone wants to feel safe in their communities and in their neighborhoods across the board. This is probably the number one thing that I have found in my experience in local government is that people want to feel safe where they live. Now, how you make it safe or how you create safety, that's an issue of the city council to determine. Now, for better or for worse, many cities, including my own city, we spend 2/3 of our budget on law enforcement. That is hiring the law enforcement officials that patrol our city and catch the people that are breaking the law. Now, there's been a lot of uproar over the last 4 years about whether or not we should be spending that much money on law enforcement. Well, if the people in a community want to um, reinvest some of that money or to spend that public safety money in a different way, then communities, by virtue of being actively involved in that political community, can make that happen because they are a part of the political community. If they're electing the right electeds and they are also engaging with that government as a whole, engaging with their elected officials after the election to make sure that they are accountable to what the people are asking for. So public safety is one. The quality of public education. I mentioned school districts before, but that's a local issue. For many of us, my kids are older now. My youngest is about ready to graduate from college next year.
I don't care anymore.
But for many years, my wife and I were actively involved in my kids' schools. because we were concerned and wanted to make sure that our kids were getting quality public education. Parent-teacher associations are a wonderful venue for parents to get involved and to really have impact on what's going on in their local schools. So that is a common good, right? Public school is provided for everybody, right? So that's another common good. Access to fresh food. That's an issue that's been coming up over the last few years. That there are communities, neighborhoods that do not have access to fresh food. I teach at California State University, Los Angeles. Many of my students come from they come from families who are the first in their families to go to the university. Many of them are immigrant. You know, the parents immigrated from another country. And many of them live in communities where they do not have access to fresh food, where there are a proliferation of liquor stores and little mom and pop businesses that do not have fresh food and have a lot of fast food places. So not having access to fresh food can be very detrimental, especially to children and to their health as they're growing up. So access to fresh food is a common good. What about adequate and affordable housing? We talked about, we alluded to the crisis of the unhoused in our communities. Well, much of that has to do with the lack of adequate and affordable housing in our communities. And where are our elected officials who are standing up saying we need to create more affordable housing and we need to create affordable housing that's adequate, that meets a certain criterion standard for the respect and dignity of people, and that we have services that we could provide to people that might need help to be able to stay in these affordable housing units. That is another common good that I've been able to identify through my years in local government, and public transportation. For those of us who are in urban areas, it's a big issue. I have a picture here of the metro in DC because that's one of my favorite places. That's when I first got exposed to even though I lived in Chicago, when I was older, I lived in the suburbs, so I didn't get a chance to ride around on the L too much. But when I went to DC as an adult and saw this wonderful system of public transportation, I was like, I was in heaven. I was like, oh my God, I don't have to drive a car. I can take public transportation. I can walk, right? And now, because I can get my steps in, I was just in DC last weekend. So it's another public good, and people in urban areas want those options. Related to that is alternative modes of transportation like bike lanes. I mentioned earlier that I ride my bike. And when I moved out from Chicago to California and I saw lanes for the first time, I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, there's protected, well, some are protected, some not so well protected. And that's my point. I was driving around the other day and there were bike lanes, but not very well protected. I still felt scared when cars would drive by me because it seemed like they were too close for my comfort, right? But here's a picture. I don't even know where this picture is from, but in the city not too far from me in Long Beach, California, they have dedicated bike lanes like this that are actually separated from the vehicle traffic. And people can ride safely in a dedicated bike lane, right? Where are the elected officials that are interested in cutting down on vehicle mileage, right? And the danger that vehicles persist to pedestrian that vehicles pose for pedestrians, for bicyclists, for other people that are walking along the street. Where are those people, right? This is a common good, needs to be worked on, as well as basic streets and infrastructure, right? The quality of your streets, street lighting, whether or not there are trees, like you see the trees here in the sidewalk and the parkway, even the design of the buildings. This is a beautiful fall picture, right? You could see the tree in the background with the orange leaves. I mean, all of this is local government. Local governments actually control and have jurisdiction over how a city looks and feels, right? Um, Whether the sidewalks are wide enough. I mean, you see on this sidewalk, two people can walk comfortably down the street, but it seems a bit narrow to me, especially if you're with a bunch of friends and you're walking down the street, which is what my kids like to do. So they go out with a lot of their friends and go walking around places. Maybe you want the sidewalks to be wider. Um, and the last one I'll talk about is parks, open space, right? Parks, places for kids to play, places for families to hang out, to picnic during the holidays, having play equipment for children, places for kids to, play softball or baseball or soccer or basketball, um, or things like that. But in Los Angeles, unfortunately, we're very park poor. We don't have a lot of parks per capita. So that is something that is of concern, especially in some of the denser urban areas of Los Angeles, where there are people that are very densely, where there are dense populations of people. It's even worse that there aren't a lot of park space for kids are playing like I used to play when I was little, play in the street or play in the alley or play in the front yard or something. But it's nice to have a safe, open spaces, green spaces in our communities. So in local government, what we saw as common good, right? What I'm showing here, what I'm uh, showing you is common good. We refer to in local government circles, we call it the quality of life, right? All of these things that I mentioned, all of these slides that I just went through, if done well, if we incorporate some of these things, it improves the quality of life of people that live in those communities. If you have more parks, it improves the quality of life for people that live in that community. If you have better public transportation, it improves the quality, especially bike lanes and places for people to walk safely. If there's a lot of my students complain that the lighting is poor in their communities, so when they get home late from class, they have to walk home in the dark to their apartments. That's not safe. So putting in street lights and adequate parking and everything that I mentioned, if our elected officials can do something about those issues, it improves the quality of life and addresses the common good. So that's why local government is so important, why I'm here to tell that we need to pay attention to the people that are running for our local elected positions, our city government positions, or our municipal government positions. And how do we do that? How do we engage these people? And now, for us, I don't know about you, but in our local governments here in Los Angeles County, many of them are up for election in November, which is the same time that we're going to be voting on not just the president, but for various different positions throughout our states and our local governments. So if you have people in your city that are running for election, now is a good time to talk to them because they want to talk to you because they're looking for your vote. Okay. So now's a good time to talk to them, but any time is a good time to talk to an elected official. But since we're in an election season, at least for me, and if you're in an election season, good time to talk to them. But even if you're not in an election right now, or your city's not electing city council people right now, it's still a good time to talk to local elected officials. Why is that? Because they're your neighbors. They're your neighbors. The people who are elected to these city government positions live in the city, same city that you live in. They live in your city. You might know them. You might know people that know them. You might have common interests. You might live in the same neighborhood. Your kids might go to the same schools. You might shop at the same grocery store or attend the same church. You might actually know these people. So they're local, they're familiar to you, they're your neighbors. So what I would say is start out, go online, check out who these elected officials are. Most cities will have at least their name on there and a bio. You might know them. You can always call City Hall and say, "Hey, I think I know this councilwoman. Can you give them my number and have them call me?" I used to go to school with them. We were in elementary school together, right? Or we went to high school together. Or our kids went to school together, right? Whatever it is. Look them up. See if you know them. If they have a bio and it shows, what their concerns are. If they have a concern that you share, call them up and say, "Hey, you say that you're concerned about housing, so am I. I'd love to find out more about what you're doing in this area." If they're running for office, if they're a candidate, you might want to ask them the same questions, right? Things that are important to you, but more specifically to this presentation, you should be asking more specific questions, like Pope Francis would probably want us to do. You probably should find out, are these people really disturbed by what they see in our community? Are they disturbed at the conditions that some people are living in our communities or in our neighborhoods? Um, do the candidate that's running for election, or if they're running for re-election, how do they feel about promoting the common good, some of these common goods or other things that you may be aware of that are a common good, right? One thing I didn't mention that a lot of residents are very concerned about is trash, right? Making sure, not only making sure that their trash is picked up on a regular basis, but they get upset when they drive around the city and they see maybe empty lots that have trash on them, or trash piling up on the side of a building that's being thrown around, or empty buildings that aren't being used that are barricaded, or have plywood covering the doors and windows, and maybe there's graffiti on them because it's abandoned. Right? The look of a city is also important to city councils, and they can do something about it because, again, it's a quality of life issues. So what are the issues, what are the areas of the common good that you believe need to be promoted? And do these candidates, are they actually committed to promoting any of these areas of the common good within your communities and neighborhoods as an elected official? Do any of these candidates talk about or speak to the issues concerning the poor and the vulnerable in my community? So whether they are unhoused people, whether they have mental health issues, or challenges. It could be people that are maybe they're living in substandard housing. I know that there are older people in my community that just don't have the resources to keep, to have their grass cut on a regular basis, or need help getting their trash bins out on trash collection day, or don't have the resources to repaint their house, or to keep their house looking nice in the neighborhood, or maybe are suffering in their homes. Maybe they lack access, and maybe they're not mobile anymore and they can't get out to do shopping. Um, and they're just they're just isolated in their homes, and they're vulnerable, and they need some human interaction and contact and love and support, right? Do the candidates speak to any issues like that? Or to the children that don't have a place to play, don't have a park, or any of the issues that we talked about? You can talk to people. You can ask them questions like these. You don't just have to rely on the mailers that come into your mailbox and show them all bright and shiny with their family and pictures with community members and with kids, and then vote for them because they look nice, or they look like they're family people, or they're saying the right things, right? Because we all know people can write anything they want and send it out, but getting to know them and getting to know who they really are and where their heart is a much different story, right? So even I, as an elected official, what I teach my students is don't rely on what they're saying on their website or social media, or what they say, or even what they say in public. Sit down with them, have a cup of coffee with them, and talk to them like two human beings, and find out where their heart is at. Do they really have a heart that feels for the poor and vulnerable in my community? Do they talk about working with other people in the community to promote the common good, right? There's a gentleman that's running for city council in my city right now. And as I was riding my bike, I saw he had this big poster posted at a business, and had his name. He was running for city council. And on the very bottom, it said, "Committed to the community." That was what it said that was his tagline, "Committed to the community." And so if I ever had a chance to talk to him, I'd say, okay, show me, demonstrate to me, or tell me how you're committed to the community. Do you work with other people in the community? Do you work with the local churches, synagogues, mosques, on trying to, say, deliver food to people that need food in the community? Are you working with nonprofits to try um, to address um, issues of food insecurity, or housing, affordable housing in the community? Are you working with people to kind of promote any of these other common goods? Because if that's the kind of elected official I think I would want to have, not someone who wants to do everything on his or her own, but who's willing and able to work with a community on behalf of the whole community. And that is certainly a question that we should be asking of those who are our elected officials, or those who want to seek elected office. How can I have a more meaningful conversation with candidates that go beyond their talking points, social media posts, and campaign materials? It's a question I'm throwing out to all of you. And we're going to have, in a couple minutes, a chance to open it up for questions and answers. But um, how might you have a more meaningful conversation with a candidate or with an elected official, right? How can you do that rather than waiting for, or basing your vote or your support, basing it on a commercial or a social media post, or a flyer or mailer that comes in the mail? How can you have um, a more meaningful conversation? Well, I'll tell you just from my experience, right? As I mentioned earlier at the outset of this slide, that I'm a neighbor of everyone that I served when I was on the city council, and I still serve because I'm on the planning commission of the city. So I still serve my neighbors, and I am always open to hearing from my neighbors. And if people want to take me out and have a cup of coffee, or share a meal together, a lunch, or just sit at the park and chat or whatever, I am totally open to doing that with the people that live in my city, right? There may be other ways that you can think of that you can have these conversations, but obviously it's up to you and how comfortable you feel and what context, what atmosphere would constitute or represent an opportunity for you to have a meaningful conversation with an elected official. I know when I talk to my students about meeting elected officials, because that's one of the assignments in my classes that I actually assign them to meet their elected officials. And they're always very nervous and very intimidated by meeting the prospect of meeting with an elected official. So I always tell them, well, you don't have to go meet with them in City Hall or in some place formal. Invite them out to a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll feel more comfortable there. Or invite them to your house if you're comfortable with that. Or invite them to where you work. Or invite, if it's in the community, right? But you might want to think about, a neutral place where you don't feel so intimidated about meeting with them. So use your ability to talk to people and to create relationships with people and to be the loving people that you all are, to invite people to just have a conversation with them about various serious issues that are going on in your community, but approaching them not with disdain or distrust because they're elected officials, but because you want to take responsibility, you want to take it upon yourself to act on your responsibility as a member of the public in a political community to ensure that you are voting for the right people who represent your values and really truly want to promote the common good in their communities. So with that, we're at quarter to the hour. And I promised Aaron it would be a hard stop so we could have some questions. So Aaron, should I throw it to you?
Sure. Timed to the minute. That was impressive. Thank you, Victor. I appreciate all of your wisdom and sharing your experience. I personally feel more empowered and able to be an active member of my community. So that's great. I appreciate it. I will turn it over to all of you attending here with us. We're going to open it up for Q&A. I will help keep an eye on the chat, but if you prefer to come off mute and ask questions that way, you're welcome to do that as well.
Okay, I do see a question in the chat, Aaron. So I'm going to go ahead. Shane, you're welcome, Shane. How to hold elected officials accountable to their campaign promises? Well, there's actually a pretty simple answer to that in my mind, right? As somebody who, again, has held an elected position, the way that you keep elected officials accountable is by maintaining a relationship with them. Too many times, what I've seen over the past 20 some years that I've been an elected official, the only time we keep them accountable is when something is wrong. And then we say, oh my God, we can't believe that this is happening. Let's call all these people and let's go down to City Hall to the next city council meeting, and we're going to stomp our feet and we're going to shake our fists and we're going to go up to the dais and we're going to tell them how pissed off we are that they're not doing what we told them to do. And then we're going to leave and we're not going to come back until the next time we get pissed off. I think that's how we all envision that city government works. And that our role is solely limited to the time we're pissed off about something and we can go and talk to somebody at City Hall. What I'm here to tell you is that's the wrong way of looking at it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, But I don't think democracy should be run with a limited, because really your role in the public is very limited if you only show up when you're pissed off about something. If you only go to City Hall once a year, and most people don't even go once a year, they only go when they're pissed, which is maybe once every 5 years, if that, right? Then you're not really taking your responsibility as a member of the public very seriously. So what I would say to you, Shane, is if you want to take it seriously, right, in terms of keeping people accountable, it has to be through the relationship you have with individual council members, right? Because it's through that relationship, right, and connection and understanding that you have with that person that will allow you to sit down and have a meaningful conversation with that person and say, listen, I voted for you. I consider you a valuable member of this council, but your view on such and such is wrong. And I'm going to tell you why. And I would hope that you would reconsider. And I hope you would consider doing something differently. Because I'm not just here talking for myself, but I also have friends in the community that are also voters that are willing to, that have the same view as I do. So that's how I do it. But really has to be in the context of a relationship. If you only show up every so often to keep people accountable, if I'm going to pick on you, Father John, because I see you on my screen. But if Father John only showed up, once a month to my office to complain about something, it would be easy for me to ignore Father John. But if he showed up in my office or took me out to coffee or we saw each other a little bit more frequently and he would continue to talk to me about issues that were of concern to him and his community members and his neighbors and maybe his parishioners, then over time I might say, Father John has a point. He's a good guy. He represents a lot of people in the community. Maybe I do need to think about doing something differently, right? So that's how I would approach it. That would be my suggestion, Shane. Thanks, Shane. You're very welcome. My pleasure. Anyone else have any questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Dan Ream. I'm a Jesuit in Cleveland, Ohio. And, every election, there are just so many local judges. I have no idea. Can you give some advice, some suggestions? How do you approach that?
I think that's a
don't
tough,
want to
that's a tough one. Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, it's a tough one for me too, because again, I'm in Los Angeles County, so we have a slew of judges on every election ballot. Of course, the relationship thing doesn't work too well with judges because they're kind of hard to track down. I know a few judges, but they're really hard to track down, and they're not like centrally located like in our city hall, which is down the street from where we live, or fairly accessible to us. The best advice I can give you, which is probably not great advice, but I think it could be helpful, is I look to see if there are groups or that do keep track of judge elections in your community. It could be the local newspaper. It could be affiliated with political parties, whether it's the Democrats, Republicans, Green Party, whatever party. And many times these parties will actually track candidates. The League of Women Voters is also a great resource, and they're nonpartisan. And many times they will look at all the ballot and kind of give their recommendations on ballots. For judges in particular, I always check the bar. So either it's the State Bar Association or there's also the local, there's a local, I think it's usually county-based bar. Like here it's the Los Angeles County Bar Association. And they'll usually have ratings of judges. But it's not ratings like the bar will say, this person is qualified to run for this position, or this person is not qualified. So that might be something that could help you. Obviously, if the bar doesn't think they're qualified to be a judge, you might think twice about voting for that person for judge. So those are a few resources, but yeah, I would check around and see if there are, groups or like-minded groups that you might trust that could give you some clue on how to assess some of these judge candidates.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Victor.
Yeah.
There is someone looking for the sources for your Pope Francis quotes. I can help with that follow-up after too, if you don't have those handy. But
Great.
does
I don't have them handy, but I can email them to you, Erin, if that's
perfect. Yeah, and Ken, I can get those to you as well.
okay. Great.
Any other questions from folks?
Hi, I do have a question. Sorry, I was kind of looking for my mute button. I'm Alexia Dolmakian. I'm the Assistant Director of Social Justice at St. John's University, and we've got a few voting programs for students. So I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around different resources and opportunities for students and how to best relay this information for students. A lot of them are overwhelmed, also distrustful, and so naturally there's a lot of kind of discussion around this. One question that I have, based on what you shared, a lot of the information you shared is really useful and helpful, so I appreciate that. And what I'm trying to say is, like, every piece that you said, I'm like eating up. So my question is about, when meeting with council members, like, what is, I guess, more specifically, some ideas for a meeting? Like, should we be thinking about timing? Should we be thinking about, should our points be quick and concise? Should we be sharing personal stories? What kinds of things are helpful to the council members when we're meeting?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Alexia, for that question. As I mentioned before, and maybe it's because I'm a social worker, but well, actually, it is because I'm a social worker. But I like to approach these interactions, with with elected people, as if I were meeting with somebody new that I wanted to get to know. So I put aside the council piece because students especially get very intimidated by meeting with elected officials, or they don't trust elected officials, which many people don't, not just students, right? So, and to tell you the truth, the elected official may not trust you either, right? I mean, there definitely is a rise now, I've seen, of elected officials that are really nervous about meeting with people because they never know, if they don't trust them. They might, have something recording on their phone, and then they're going to put it on social media, and all of a sudden it blows up, and or they'll take something that they said out of context and put it on a social media post, and so there's really mistrust both ways. And I think that if you're going to prepare students to meet with them, I would say, one thing I would do is say, have them meet with a group of people. So if they're a group of people that live in the same city, have them go as a group, 2, 3, 4, because then they'll feel safe in numbers. And the second thing I would do is do some homework, right, on that elected official, and look for common ground first and foremost. Don't go in there pointing your finger and shaking your fist and saying, how come you're not doing something about this? And how come you're not doing something about that? Because then you put that elected on the defensive, and you're not really going to get anywhere with that conversation. So I think you really want to build the trust and the relationship, because, as I mentioned in my comment to Shane earlier, you want that relationship to continue so that the students can go back and be welcomed and say, at some point in the future, and say, you know what? We really appreciate your meeting with us, since we first met a few months ago. We really have some concerns. We've got people in the community that have been telling us stories about, trash piling up in this empty lot down the street, and people don't like it. And we really need you. Is there something that you can do about it? Right. So that's kind of the way that I would put it. But if you want to contact me, I'll put some contact information. I'll have it on a slide, and I know Aaron will know how to contact me as well. So if you want to contact me directly, Alexia, I'd be happy to have further conversation with you about that.
Thank you. Yes, I really appreciate your points about prioritizing the relationship. And I think sometimes we get so lost in like this idea of what a council person or congressperson is. And so yeah, those are good
Yeah.
points to pass on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexis, for saying that, because I think we see the political landscape right now, and we think, and because most people don't trust politicians or politics, they just don't go in thinking that this person I'm talking to is a real person. But they are. Believe me, I've had people say really horrible things to me, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, you think you can just say horrible things to another person like that? I mean, I would never say anything like that to somebody, but you feel comfortable getting up in a public space and telling me that I'm and this is true. Someone said that what I was doing as the mayor was akin to, reminded him of Nazi Germany. And I was like, look at him like, really? I'm like, you don't even know me. How can you say that? But people right now are willing to say that. But, do I ever want to talk to that guy again? Not really. I know who he is. He lives in the community. I don't think he thought, well, I could just tell him whatever. And, so anyways, yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because all of us are, by virtue of being a child of God, we all need to treat each other with respect, no matter what your position is, whether you're elected or you're not elected. So yes, go into that with that mindset. I think that will really help.
Thank you again. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Victor, for being with us, for sharing your experience. I know it's been informative for me. I shared the link again to our Voting is an Act of Love landing page in the chat. If you weren't here at the beginning, you can find another webinar next week, as well as our voting pledge and some other resources. And I will also share out the recording of this session probably sometime next week. And Victor, if you're willing, we can include your email or contact in that too, if folks have follow-up questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Be happy to talk with any of you.
Excellent. Thanks all. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.